All right, so today's workshop is Healing as Part of Collective Liberation, Taking Care of Our and Others' Well-Being. Today with us, we have Mhelaab Jamel. She's a researcher and community educator with nearly a decade of experience in grassroots human rights activism. She has worked on issues of gender justice in public policy for the past 6 years in Pakistan. Her research interest is positioned at the intersection of feminist and queer theory, with a focus of cultural politics and governance of gender and sexuality in post-colonial contexts, particularly South Asia. She has been actively involved in various advocacy ventures for developing gender-sensitive policy frameworks in Pakistan. So with further ado, please welcome Mhelaab Jamel.
Hello, thank you so much, AIM, and to the Animalization team, and welcome to everyone to this today's workshop on healing as part of collective liberation. I'm very excited to be joining you all from Islamabad, Pakistan. It's a little chilly here. Very happy to be part of this workshop. I hope we make a warm room for everyone here today. Thank you so much, AIM, for the kind introduction. As it was mentioned, I'm a human rights activist, and I love working on a lot of issues that are related to movement building. Today, I'm talking to you about what healing looks like in the movement and how we can incorporate that more in our movements. I should say off the hat that I don't have answers. I don't think a lot of us have answers. It's important to ask the right questions, and perhaps the answers may look different for everyone, but the process of questioning can allow us to learn better from each other. So the purpose of today's space is also to learn from each other. I should also mention that I'm not a therapist or a mental health care provider. I am training to be a therapist, but not one yet. I am an activist. I have been involved in different movements, leftist, feminist, queer movements. I've been part of many organizations, and what I am talking to you today about is very much drawing from my own experiences, and I would love for you to bring in your own reflections, your own experiences, especially using the chat feature, so I can access most of your experiences, and we can make this a collective safe space for each other, and learn from each other in the process. So let's begin. Let me share my screen with all of you. Oh. So can you see my slides?
Yes.
Good. So why talk about well-being or healing? The reason is, as Sarah Ahmed says, a system can put some bodies under pressure without that pressure even being experienced, let alone witnessed by others who are not under that pressure. A lot of us become part of different forms of movements or different activist circles because we are people of marginalized experience, or we have seen a lot of suffering happening and we want to do something about it. Oftentimes, our own experiences of marginalization, of having different access to different structures or being oppressed by those structures means that those systems are very much putting a lot of stress on our bodies, on our psyche. And as a result of that, what ends up happening is that we are oftentimes in a state of injury. So it is important to be able to address those wounds that come up. It is important to be able to incorporate healing into the work that we do. That work really starts with acknowledging our needs, acknowledging the fact that we as human beings have needs. I love Abraham Maslow and the way he created a hierarchy of needs to basically understand what we as humans require in our lives. And you can see that on your screens, that these needs start from our physiological needs, such as food, sleep, sex, other breathing, water, right? And then we go towards safety, financial safety, safety of a home, safety from disaster, safety of having resources to address your health issues. Then we go towards our intimacy needs, our love and belonging that we need to be part of something bigger than us, to be part of a family, of a community, to have a home. And when we have fulfilled those needs, then we talk about our esteem needs, our needs to be recognized, to be appreciated, to be not be taken granted for our work, but to be appreciated and acknowledged and awarded for the work that we do and for whatever we are able to contribute. Only then, when we have fulfilled these needs, can we become fully self-actualized human beings. So, an affirmation that I would like to share with you today, and I would like you to repeat with me, is that my desires and needs are valid. This is the reason that we need to say this and need to keep saying this to ourselves and encourage each other to say this to themselves, is because as activists, oftentimes we are doing so much for other people that we constantly neglect our own needs. And if we continue to neglect our own needs, if our own cup is empty, then how can we fill others' cups? Yeah. So the question really at the end of the day is, when I say whether our cup is full or not, is a question of whether we are working sustainably or not. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Let me just turn on my gallery mode so I can see. What you can do is, as you see the question, please use the raise hand feature to tell me whether you have experienced what the question asks. And if you have not experienced it, then you do not raise your hand. Yeah. The first question is, have you ever felt guilty that you're not doing enough to help the cause you're fighting for? Someone has raised 2 hands. Next question. Do you feel your work and dedication to the cause is regularly recognized by your peers? Not as many hands now. Next question. Have you ever felt that your labor, the work that you do, is invisible, not acknowledged, or taken for granted? Oh, lots of hands. Yikes. Oh, wait, I should raise my hand as well. Next question. Do you feel you can step away or take time off from your activism without feeling selfish? Just 2 hands? 3, good, good. 4, 5. That's encouraging to see. Next question. Have you ever been told that you complain too much about the toll activism is taking on you? Okay. Next question. Have you ever been asked to make sacrifices for the movement that you're a part of? I see Elia's hand and a lot of others. Sacrifice is considered to be something so sacred. Next question. Do you sometimes feel that being a martyr for the cause you're fighting for will be for the greater good? Thank you for sharing. So, have you ever felt unsafe while doing your activism? Lots and lots of hands. So my question to you at this point is going to be, is this activism or bargaining? Because if you have answered yes to most of these questions, then I'm very sad to say that you are working in a very unsustainable fashion. And this is not activism as much as it is a bargain where you are giving away your health, giving away your needs, giving away your own desires in order to make the world a better place. And believe me, that's a very noble thing to do. I really appreciate that. But I also want you to be happy and well taken care of and be very fulfilled while doing your work. I mean, as an activist, nobody ever said that to me. So let me say that to you now, that you deserve to do your work, to be recognized for your work, and work in a sustainable way and bring change, because that is entirely possible. You do not have to sacrifice yourselves in order to bring change. There are ways to work to create such movements, and we have to make those ways to create our movements in a way that can still change the world without destroying ourselves. A quote I love at this note is something that Eleanor Douglas said. She's a feminist activist, that we cannot promise to complete the revolution in 3 years, along with a baseline survey and complete project evaluation. It does not happen like that. So oftentimes the kind of requirements that are made from activists are the reason why we feel so tired or not and taken for granted. So we have to understand that change is a gradual process. What is sustainability then? That's a big word for today. I love this definition by Jane Barry and Jelena Dordovich in the book, What's the Point of Revolution If We Cannot Dance? Being able to do the work you love and still feeling full and happy in every part of your life, feeling safe, feeling connected, feeling recognized, respected, and valued for who you are and for what you do. At any age, working on any issue, living in balance, authentically, true to your own values, finding a way to put the soul back into your life and work. Every time I read this definition, it really rejuvenates me, because oftentimes work, for me at least, felt like drudgery, like I have to do this, not that I want to do this. So that just goes on to say that my work is really exhausting me, and I need to find ways to work sustainably, in other words. So, but sustainable activism or sustaining activism is a conscious set of choices. It's almost like a reorientation of your work that is grounded in certain political principles. There is no cheat sheet or formula. It is actually a change in your approach itself to see how you want to bring change. And I would like to share my own personal experience here, and I would love for you to share yours in the chat. That oftentimes what was required from me, at least, was to participate in such movement spaces where we wanted to address trauma by traumatizing each other. So something that Vikramaditya Sahai, a scholar and a trans activist, says very beautifully is that we don't have movements that are centered around heartbreak. We break each other's hearts to heal our movements. And unfortunately, a lot of our activist circles look like that, where there is a constant re-traumatization cycle that contributes to the unsustainability that we're talking about today. Which is why it's very important to incorporate self-care into our work as a political principle, because we don't have any other choice. We need to be able to preserve ourselves, especially those of us who have been told that we're not meant to survive. So we will be ending our workshop today with a note on self-care and coming up with our self-care plans. But before we do that, I mean, we just started, we would do something to check, what our needs are, what's going on within ourselves. In order to do that, I would invite you to engage in a little bit of like an amateur mechanic thing. So if you are like me and you're a very curious person and you love tinkering around with little things, so what we're going to tinker around with is ourselves today, but it's going to look like something like, you know, you go into the garage and you kick open the hood of your car and see what's going on in there to see if your car is working fine. Okay, we're going to do a couple of exercises. I'm going to talk to you about stress, burnout, and compassion fatigue, which is usually some of the main problems that contribute towards unsustainable movements. Yeah. Okay. So let's start with stress. But before we do that, I would love for all of you to have a glass, an empty glass right next to your, right next to you where you're sitting, and maybe have a bottle of, or a jug or anything of water, filled with water next to it. Yeah, I will tell you what to do with it, don't worry. So, if this little cup here was filled with water, which it is not, if I were to fill it with water and I started shaking it, what would happen? You can unmute and tell me. If it's filled up to water till here, and if I start shaking it, what would happen? Anyone? Crickets chirping, silence. Aim, do you want to take a guess? If this were filled to water and if I start shaking, what would happen?
Yes, it will spill, and a lot of people say in the chat as well.
Oh, okay, sorry, I'm not doing the, sorry, I should check the chat more often. Yes, absolutely right, it will fall over, yeah? So imagine that this little cup is your body and the water inside it is the stress, right? If your cup is filled with stress, the moment any shaking happens, it will spill over. Now, stress is an important part of life. You cannot get rid of stress. And what you cannot also get rid of this shaking. Life is full of ups and downs. There is going to be shaking. You are going to be challenged. You are going to be seeing difficult circumstances. But if your cup is already filled with so much stress that the moment any shaking happens, it's going to be a mess and it's not going to be pretty. So what you want to do is to reduce the level of stress in your cup to an extent that when the shaking happens, there is not a mess for you to clean later. Yeah? So please keep your cup and your water right next to you, because what we are going to be doing is checking how much stress we are carrying. So tell me what stress looks like for you, either in the chat or you can unmute yourself as well. What happens when you feel stressed? What does it look like for you? How does your body feel when you are stressed? What kind of thoughts are coming in your mind? Nervous, tense, wanting to curl up, disconnected from reality. Nothing feels good. I shake a lot. Heart palpitations and brain fog. I have a lot of tension. My jaw's jammed up together. My head is full of clouds. Breathing shallow, hard to focus. You forget things. want to like scream out and can't sleep, overthinking, head is feeling cold. Yeah. So what you have described here are pretty much a lot of physiological responses of stress. Let's get into a little bit of why that happens. There are three very important hormones in your body: cortisol, adrenaline, and noradrenaline, that regulate your stress response. So these hormones are responsible for regulating how your heart, how your muscles, how different parts of your body behave in a stressful situation. So for instance, like I mentioned before, or did I don't, I'm not really sure if I mentioned this here, but if you imagine if you were sitting in a car driving on a bridge, and out of nowhere, a child comes in front of your car, what would happen? You would probably panic and immediately hit the brakes. Can you take a moment to connect with how your body is in that moment? Like super tensed up, eyes flare open, and you can't breathe, and you just avoided killing someone, right? So what happened? What happened was that you registered a threat, and your brain immediately sent some signals to your body. These hormones got released in your system, and your muscles, your blood flow adjusted to make sure that you react immediately in that situation in order to protect yourself, in order to protect someone else, right? So this is a complicated process which begins sometimes from your increased heart rate and leads to sweating, dilated pupils, and increased blood pressure so that your muscles can become mobilized. On the other hand, your sensitivity to pain is decreased and you breathe more in a more shallow way because your body is preparing to engage in a response so you can actually, do something quick in that situation. Yeah. Your digestive response also changes. With it also comes some emotional changes, like you may actually feel more aggressive or angry. For instance, if you're being attacked, then you would want to be in a situation where you can defend yourself. Or it can be like a fearful response where you're just shrinking and making sure that you are not very visible. On the other hand, what also happens is that your executive function, what the cognitive brain right here, its abilities reduce in their function for some time because your limbic brain becomes more active because you are under stress, because you need to survive. So your logical reasoning decreases, your sequential memory decreases. Somebody mentioned here in the chat that they tend to forget things. This is because you have a lot of cortisol in your system, right? So imagine if this state of being, like you were in that about to be a car crash situation, was your constant state of being. How hard that would be on your body if this hormonal system was so imbalanced that you're constantly in this state of stress. Yeah. I want to introduce to you a little bit of the neuropsychology of stress so that you can so you can understand yourself better. And for that purpose, I would like to introduce you to Stephen Porges. Stephen Porges proposed the polyvagal theory, which is all the rage these days, honestly. I'm sure some of you have already come across his work. But let me, in a very simplistic way, use Stephen Porges' his work today to help us understand our stress response better, and we can maybe come up with some ways to see, how we can deal with our stress in a better way. Yeah. So Stephen Porges says that our autonomic nervous system, so the keys in the word autonomic, the system that regulates your automatic responses like your heartbeat, your breathing, your digestion, the things that do not require any of your will or control, that happen involuntarily. So this system is divided into the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The balance between these two systems is known as homeostasis, equilibrium. What is the system composed of? It is composed of the vagus nerve, or what is often called as the wandering nerve, because it's the largest nerve on your body, extending from your brain all the way down to your spinal cord. And it touches the most important organs in your body, and it regulates some of the most important functions in your body. It is divided into the dorsal and the ventral branch. I know this is a lot of nomenclature. You don't have to remember this. I promise I'm getting somewhere with this. The dorsal branch of this nerve controls what is known as the freeze response. And the ventral branch of this ventral vagal branch of this system controls what is known as the safe engagement response. The sympathetic nervous system, as we discussed earlier, regulates your fight or flight response. So you might have heard these words: fight, flight, or freeze. What does that mean? You were in hunting gathering societies, you are living in caves, a wild animals comes out from somewhere, and you're just like, oh my God, I need to survive. What kicks in? That's your fight, flight, or freeze response. You would either fight that lion. I wouldn't. You would run away. I would. Or you would try to freeze yourself, like just make yourself invisible so that the lion just goes away. Or like, you know, that story about the bear, you pretend to sleep, you pretend to be dead and the bear goes away. You know, that, I mean, I've been told that's a myth, but this is your freeze response coming in. And these responses are part of your what is called the primitive brain, the animal brain. So it is also called, I don't agree with that terminology, but the idea with that is that this is something that is a primitive survival response that is inlaid in your system in order to help you survive in any stressful situations, in order to help you deal with stress. Yeah. What happens is that if you are in traumatic situations or prolonged stress over extended periods, your autonomic nervous system can be in a state of extreme imbalance. It's always trying to, it is convinced you that you are constantly in a state of danger and you need to protect yourself. That is the state of dysregulation where stress comes from. So let me make it very simple for you. If you're living in Asia, generally, I have a feeling you would have, in your bathroom, you would have the hot water tap and the cold water tap. Yeah. So what you see in front of your screen right now is the parasympathetic system and the sympathetic nervous system. The thing that is in red, you can imagine that as the hot water tap. And the thing that is in blue, you can imagine that as the cold water tap. And if you're a person like me, you always struggle with getting the right balance of the hot and cold water during the shower. So something similar is going to happen here. So your sympathetic nervous system deals with getting your system activated up, amped up to deal with a stressful situation, what we call the fight or flight response. So your pupils become dilated, your salivation is inhibited, your bronchi are relaxed so that more oxygen can come in, your heartbeat increases, so more blood gets pumped out, your digestion is slowed. You might even feel some cramps in your stomach because your intestinal muscles become very tight. Yeah, this is how your body prepares for you for either engaging in a fight or running away. On the other hand, the cold water tap part of the system is when you turn on this tap, your pupils become constricted, saliva is, more salivary production is introduced, your bronchi become constricted, you have a slow resting heart rate, digestion is increased, the digestion response becomes more regulated. Yeah. And it can also have an impact on your sexual response as well. So this is where the safe engagement response, where you feel safe, comes from. So when you feel safe, your digestion, that's always the biggest clue, works fine. You feel more connected with everything. But this can also backfire if your system is so dysregulated that it over freezes you, goes beyond its limit and it takes you into the freeze response. So that also is regulated by the parasympathetic system. So what we're going to do now is try to see the practical implication of this for ourselves. What we're going to do now is divide into breakout rooms, and we're going to do a little exercise using the Polywogle Ladder. Let me explain what the exercise is going to look like for you. So if you will, there will be a link shared with you in which there are some exercise prompts. You're going to open exercise 1 called the Polywogle Ladder. It's going to look something like this. Hang on, exercise prompts. Yes. Yes, it's going to look like this. This is a ladder right here. What you're going to do is you're going to start at the bottom of the ladder. You will, what your freeze response looks like, you know, when you're immobilized or collapsed. That's the dorsal vagal part that we discussed, right, of the parasympathetic system. You're going to describe what the world looks like when you're in that state. Maybe it's a color, maybe it's a feeling, maybe it's a description of how your body looks like, maybe it's a memory. And you're also going to describe how you are in that situation. So the world is, and I am. You're going to fill that out. Yeah. And then you're going to move up the ladder to the sympathetic system, where you are geared up for fight and flight. What does the world look like? What color is it? What texture is it? What's the feeling that comes up, and how you are in that situation? And finally, you're going to go to the top of the ladder, and which is the ventral vagal part, where you feel safe and connected. What does that look like for you? What does the world look like, and how you are in that situation? Yeah. So please remember to follow the sequence. Do not start from the top, start from the bottom and go to the top of the ladder. You're going to be divided into breakout rooms. So this is going to be for 10 minutes. When you're filling this out, please feel free to unmute yourself and talk to each other while you're filling this out and share your experiences with each other. I will be circulating through these breakout rooms to see how you're doing in each of them. Over to you, Aim. Hi to those whose rooms I sneakily came in to see how you were doing going up the ladder. I was seeing some of your responses about how going up the ladder. I would invite, would anyone like to share how, what the Polywogle Ladder looks like for them? You can raise your hand and then unmute yourself. Pin, do you want to do that? Hi, Pin. You have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to share the first stage. I think the world is chaos and I am anxious. And the five response, the second stage is the world is moving so fast, I'm lost. And the third one is the world is at ease and I can be myself.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Would anyone else like to share?
Thank you.
Please raise your hand and then you can unmute yourself. Yes.
Hello.
Hi.
Well, in my case, I think in the first stage, like the feeling is like pessimistic, like the world is a horrible place where and I cannot do anything and I feel like crying. And the second stage is maybe, I don't know if this is like correct for the, but maybe hope, like, well, we still didn't achieve all the things that we have done, but well, we are moving and trying to do something at least. And for the final step, I'm feeling like fulfilled, like when we did I don't know, some project or something that we felt like, well, we did something, it worked. And yeah, I think we never feel like completely satisfied with, because I think that they will be when all the problems of the world are solved.
Okay.
And I don't know if we are going to reach that day someday, but yeah, at least we feel like, well, we have improved the world for a little.
Mm, thank you.
And
Thank you so
maybe,
much.
yeah. So that's like
Yeah,
hope
yeah, yeah.
and
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. One more person, would you like to share your Polywogle Ladder response? Anyone? Volunteer, volunteer. Nobody? Okay. So what you would have seen through the two folks who told us about the Polywogle Ladder responses is that, I don't know if you noticed, but maybe it was just me, that as they were moving up the ladder, did you see the change in their facial expression? Like when they were in the dorsal waggle state, when they were in the freeze response, there was almost something showing in the face about how stressful that can actually be, right? And as you move up the ladder and you move towards more safety, you can actually feel your body feeling a little bit more relaxed, right? Just that memory really brings up what the feeling of safety is like. Of course, it's not, it's harder for a lot of us as well to connect with that safety, because oftentimes there's a lot of unsafety within our bodies as well, right? But if we use such a tool, we can actually identify, what these different states look like, and how, for instance, when we are in a state of stress, when we are very overwhelmed, we are unable to identify how we are in that moment. At that time, this can be helpful, and we can be like, oh, this is my freeze response. Oh, I'm in my fight or flight response, or that I'm feeling safe and engaged. Yeah. So the purpose of doing that is that we are able to identify when we are dysregulated and how we can move towards more regulation, right? So when you're in your freeze response, when you are collapsed, when you're immobilized, when you're just like, it's chaos, I just give up, I can't do anything, this pile of laundry is like piling up even more, there's darkness everywhere, that is your hypoarousal state. It's like a cold, frigid mountain, right? It's almost like a state of dissociation where you're not even connected with your body fully. The opposite of it is the state of hyperarousal, when you are like a red hot volcano, you're fighting, or you're aggression, like I'm gonna punch this guy, how dare he like call me something that I don't like. And then, or you're trying to run away from a threat, right? So there's a lot of energy, lots of activation here. You're yelling, you're running away, there's a lot of discomfort. So both of these are states of dysregulation. There is either lack of energy or there is too much energy. What you want is to go into the window of tolerance. Now, that is a very sweet place to be in. And the way that you can do that is, again, going through your parasympathetic system by doing certain regulation activities that expand your window of tolerance. So anytime a stressful situation happens, you go into the hyperarousal or hypoarousal state, you can do certain things in order to bring yourself back into the room through that window of tolerance. And your goal is to increase the space, expand your window of tolerance as much as you can. You see this little unicorn is able to flow freely in that wider state. It's like a, when the river becomes wider, the water flows calmly. But when the river is flowing through like more a constricted space, there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of activity, there's a lot of noise. It's the same principle over here, right? So when you expand your window of tolerance, you can actually ensure that you can deal with your stress response in a better way. Now, let me clarify here that expanding your window of tolerance does not mean that you will not be stressed. It means that you will be able to deal with stress in a better way. So your body's natural response is to engage in stress in order to protect you, right? But if you're constantly stuck in the state of stress, either freeze or fight or flight, that is the problem. A good, healthy nervous system looks something like this. There is oscillation. So you are hyper-aroused or hypo-aroused, but you move back to the state of regulation. So it looks like an oscillating rhythmatic movement. So whenever stress happens, if you're successfully able to maneuver through this rhythmatic motion, that means your system is more regulated. But if you are hoping that somehow your cup will never be filled with stress, that's not going to happen. Just as the shaking is always going to happen. So therefore, what you can do is, what is possible for you is to expand your window of tolerance. And the way to do that, there are so many ways to do that. There are lots of people you can listen to on YouTube. One channel that I really, really like is called Therapy in a Nutshell. And another person that I like is Kathy Kane. You can look her up, her work as well. They're excellent people who provide some resources on how to regulate yourself. Yeah. So, and the purpose of that regulation, as I mentioned, is to ensure that you can be in that state of homeostasis, as we mentioned. Yeah. So maintaining a state of consistency is one way to ensure that your stress response is better equipped to deal with the situation. What also helps, personally, I can share my own personal experience, is breathing. Now, I will not recommend this for everyone, but because everyone has a different way of engaging with this, but one way that you can center yourself and ground yourself when you're having a flight, especially a fight or flight response, is by engaging in a breathing exercise. Simple breathing through your belly. What that does is it sends signals to your nervous system that you are in a state of safety. So the threat that the system is feeling is reduced. So the parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. It restores your digestion. It lowers your heart rate. More oxygen in your system, right? If you're in the freeze response, what you can do is you can get up and shake. Engage in any activity, even if you're lying on the bed, just shake up, build more energy in your system. So if you imagine this like the previous graphic that I showed you, if the hypoarousal looks like a cold mountain, you want to introduce more energy here. The way to do that is by really heating yourself up, by engaging in more movement, dancing, even sometimes listening to music can help you feel more, and no sad music. Sometimes actually that works as well. For a lot of people I've seen that listening to sad music helps them get out of the freeze response, right? The idea here is to introduce more activity in your system so you can get out of that particular state. Cool? Okay. We are going to move to the next part, which is burnout. What is burnout? Burnout has been defined as a prolonged response to chronic emotional and interpersonal stresses on the job. It usually manifests as exhaustion, cynicism, and decreased professional efficacy. You're unable to work really. The term burnout actually came out as a result of the Industrial Revolution because the workers at that time were working insane hours. They were dealing with a lot of inhumane environment, and as a result of that, they would experience burnout and they would be unable to function really. The consequences of such an environment are that such an environment is chaotic, is threatening, it's abusive or dehumanizing. And the primary indicator of this is the way that you can really identify if a workplace is more conducive to creating burnout is that you feel fear and cynicism in that workplace. Oftentimes, this is exactly what happens in movement spaces. And I should make it very clear that I consider movement spaces as workspaces. Even if you're volunteering, you're doing the work. So these are workspaces and you have to treat them like that. Now, can you identify with any of these symptoms of burnout? For instance, The physical symptoms may look like feeling tired and drained out most of the time. You have frequent illnesses, frequent headaches, your sleeping and eating habit change. The emotional responses may look something like a sense of failure or self-doubt, especially related to your work, feeling helpless, trapped and defeated. There's a lot of detachment. Loss of motivation is a key thing that nothing is going to change. It's pointless. The world is hopeless. And usually it manifests in the behavioral responses like you isolate yourself from others, you procrastinate, you take longer to do things. Sometimes, actually a lot of times, and I've seen people use drugs, alcohol to really suppress those feelings of failure, of not being able to produce results on time, of just dealing with the fact that the world is messed up. You can't do anything. So you just bury yourself in one thing or the other. Yeah. You have no motivation to show up to your workspace. You either show up late or you're not really there when you're there. Can any of you identify with these symptoms? You can raise your hand to show me. Yeah, see, I see a lot of burnout in this room. So, what are some of the warning signs of a toxic work environment which can cause these symptoms? Can any one of you identify with these? Something that looks like toxic leaders who yell at you, who make you feel little. There's a lack of work and life balance. You know, when you're home, you're still working. You take your office to home. There are no policy structures. There's no governance. There's inconsistent way of dealing with whatever happens. So at one point, there is one policy that is adopted for someone, another for someone else. There is low morale and negativity, poor communication. That's really the big one. Water cooler gossip is a very key indicator of a toxic work environment. Lots of information being exchanged through the gossip circles, like, oh, did you find out what that activist did, or what that person did? What does activist burnout look like? It's the act of involuntary leaving activism or reducing one's level of activism because you're literally out of energy. That can look like a creeping feeling that activism is taking over your life. You're unable to make decisions. You can't stay focused anymore. You can't sleep. I know, I've been there. There is a growing tendency to think negatively. There's a pervasive feeling of helplessness. You just lose your energy and you're always in a state of disconnection. You disconnect from your friends because you don't find that exciting anymore. And it's almost like you're running on a state of empty. Who is at higher risk of such burnout? Those activists who are outside of supportive organizations, who do underground work, who confront the police, who face a lot of threats in their work, who face armed forces or opponents, who witness injuries or suffering done to others. That is the most important one, including in solidarity work, the kind of injury that we do to each other, having to make choices to support or rescue others, the frontline responders. Now, this is not an extensive list of causes, but these are some of the people who are most prone to burnout. Burnout, for me, is a structural issue. But some of the elements of such burnout I know I'm going through this a little bit fast, but I promise to listen to your reflections if you put them in the chat or during the breakout sessions. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I will address them. Yeah. The three main elements of burnout are exhaustion, cynicism, and inefficacy. I can identify myself with all three of them, literally, because the first thing that happens when you're burnt out is that you start feeling exhausted. My coping response was just not to feel that exhaustion and just keep going on and on and on. And I see a lot of activists doing that as well. It's like, we must do something. We should not feel tired, right? What that ends up showing up as is cynicism, where you just have such a hopeless view of the world, right? All the negative things seem to stand out much more. And then eventually that just shows up as inefficacy, because no matter what you do, how much you do, that is not enough. And that's exactly when you burn out. Burnout is a structural issue for me. So it's the movement's culture that contributes to that burnout. Some of the things you may be able to identify, I'll share with you that the research shows. I was going through some of the, especially the movements, animal rights movements, animal justice movements, in which burnout happened, right? So some of the research says that activists share the ups, the goods around organizational or movement successes, but left individuals to deal with the downs themselves. There was a lot of infighting and ego clashes and hostility between the activists. Activists tended to police each other's commitment to the cause. You are not that big of an activist as I am or someone else is, you know, just policing each other to contribute towards the movement's success. That elevated burnout. There was a destructive work ethic that correlated the value of the activists to the work that they were doing. In other words, you are unworthy as a person if you are not doing enough to contribute to the cause. There was a culture of martyrdom. You were expected to sacrifice your time, your relationships, your basic needs and desires in order to show your commitment to the cause. What is perhaps very prominent, at least I see that a lot in my circles, is something that is called the cowboy mentality, which is like those leaders, you may be able to identify them really easily, who have a very romanticized perception of the movement as the big thing that's going to change the world, but they disparage those who don't conform to their idea of what the movement should look like. They constantly put you down. They tell you that you're not doing enough. They keep berating you. They expect you to be all macho and desensitized so you can be effective. They tell you to not take care of your emotional needs. They tell you to be strong. This macho movement culture is geared towards adrenaline highs. So a lot of movements often look like chasing these highs from one protest to another. We have done this, let's do that now. We need to do more action-oriented things. We need to get out there. Does not even caring the kind of toll that it takes on your body, it takes on each other. Let's confront the police. Let's get out there, you know. Or overexposing yourself to a lot of disturbing material, right? So this is a very masculinist form of leadership, I would say, which renders it creates a gender division of labor where the caring work becomes invisible, and what becomes visible is the action-oriented and glamorous work of confrontation, right? This is not to say that confrontation is not important or that it should not happen, but the fact that the entire movement is structured around it, that leads activists to burn out very easily, right? So now we are going to do a little exercise to check. Remember, I said we're the mechanics, we're checking what's going on in there. So we're going to check in other parts. You are going to use the exercise 2 prompt to check how prone our organizations or movement or groups are to burnout by using this burnout scale. So you can divide people into groups of 10-minute breakout rooms. So very interesting discussions happening in the breakout rooms. I could see that a lot of people have experienced burnout spaces in the past. Some have been able to get out of them. Some are still dealing with the burnout. Some were able to identify some of the toxic traits that we talked about that lead to burnout. Others were more concerned with the structural issues, like how you collect feedback in larger organizations and how it becomes much harder. That is absolutely true. I think we all need to come up with creative solutions to make sure that the burnout that we talk about being a structural issue is dealt with in a structural way. So our institutions are organized in a way that they don't lead to burnout of our employees, of our volunteers, of our members, of our supporters. So in order to do that, sometimes I would say that I've seen some workspaces really reorienting their entire work principles. They're revisiting their values to see what they actually want to get right. And that can be a massively rewarding process because that can allow you self-reflection as well as group reflection, and see how you can come up with ways to not fall into the common pitfalls that a lot of movements generally do. So there are a lot of ways to deal with burnout. I would say, I would encourage you to once again explore more, and feel free to write to me as well if you want to learn about my experiences. But one thing again I will share, like I did last time in the last exercise, that has really worked for me is rest, and making rest part of the work. So this binary of working versus resting is often so counterproductive that it can lead to a lot of burnout. What has helped in my workspace, what has helped, what I've recommended to other people, or I've seen other people and having success with that is if they have lots of breaks, if they have lots of opportunities to rest, if they combine working environment with the resting environment. There's this really great page that I follow on Instagram called the Nap Ministry. It's literally dedicated to sleeping. So you can even introduce such structures into your work environment that allow for your employees to rest. I know workspaces that are so toxic sometimes that you don't even have good chairs to sit on. And sometimes you're expected to sit on your desk the entire day. So that literally becomes an access issue at one point because it's discriminating against people with different abilities, people who are living with illnesses. So that is a major contribution to burnout as well. And just to make a little bit of distinction here between what is stress and what is burnout, is that you can perhaps say burnout is a more severe stage of stress. It's a prolonged state of stress. But what often looks like, there is no neat line here, by the way, but what is common difference between stress and burnout is that stress is often over-engagement, like we talked about in the fight or flight response. There's a lot of activity, or it can look like, in the freeze response, like the loss or diminished energy, there's a lot of anxiety. But burnout is a little different. Burnout is a state of disengagement. It's like you don't even care anymore, or you don't have the energy to care anymore. There's a pervasive, deep sense of helplessness that nothing is going to change. Or even if you have ideas, you can't just even have the strength to communicate them so that you can work on them. And that's exactly when some of the dysfunctional traits in workspaces and offices come up, like gossip and other stuff that people use to cope with this sort of burnout that they're feeling. That is, once again, part of based on what they were doing, but very much a structural issue of how the broader movement culture or the culture of a workspace is organized that makes burnout more likely to happen. Now I'm going to talk, I know I'm going very, very fast, but I am very sorry for that. But the purpose of doing that is that I introduce you to as many tools as possible so you can take your time after the workshop to go through them yourself and with your group and with your members or employees, and then reflect on that. So this is why
I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
Just to remind you that we have really little time left. We have 3 minutes left. Could you really
Oh,
went.
okay.
I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
we have 2 minutes left. Okay, so I will briefly introduce the third tool that you can use, which was about compassion fatigue, which is really a combination of what we have discussed. It's stress and burnout combined together, traumatic stress and burnout that leads to compassion fatigue. What I will do is that I will share these slides with you so you can read more about it because we do not have time to cover it today. But I think it's a super, super important topic because this fatigue is something that we really feel, especially those among us who are very empathetic, right? So there's a lot of emotional work that is done by animal rights activists. There is a lot of emotional labor being done by animal rights activists. And, you know, I found this a really great article called The Caring Sleuth, which is like a portrait of an animal rights activist. I'll share that with you and see how much you can identify with that. Because if you identify with that, then you are actually very likely to be prone to compassion fatigue, right? And that compassion fatigue can contribute to making the burnout even worse, right? So the tool that you're going to be using to see how much compassion fatigue exists in your life is the ProQual assessment, the Professional Quality of Life assessment. It's a great little tool, just 10 questions through which you can judge how you are doing. Oh, actually, no more than 10 questions in this extended version to see how much, what kind of boundaries you have around the way you practice empathy. I would also recommend that you watch Brené Brown's video on empathy, on understanding empathy, and actually check out most of her work to understand what practicing empathy in movements with boundaries looks like. And I will also share this boundary evaluation tool with you to help you understand what different boundaries look like, how you can make those boundaries better in your workspace, what are restricted boundaries and what are containing boundaries, right? So this is a great little tool. It's very self-explanatory. You can very easily use that to do your own boundary evaluation. And this, I would say, is at the heart of today's workshop, boundaries. So please, please, please take time to invest in that. And when you have done that, please do a little bit of your self-care assessment. I have in the resources section, you will see your comprehensive self-care plan. This is your assignment, really. There are 6 different elements to this self-care plan: physical, spiritual, work-oriented. You can make a very, very comprehensive plan using this planner. I've always found this to be a very useful tool, and I've used this in a lot of different trainings as well. So please use that. And if you need any help, please feel free to reach out to me over email as well. But your self-care needs to have this holistic approach. Not only is this part of your work environment, but it is something that you do at home. For me, self-care is a very, very political act. It is not, you know, being in a bathtub or, you know, the Gwyneth Paltrow kind of self-care. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about making structural changes to make sure that people are able to care for their bodies, care for their mental health, and care for each other, right? And that means working on every single pillar, every single element of self-care, right? So I will end today's workshop with someone that I consider to be my, you know, ultimate godmother and activist inspiration, Audre Lorde, who really has been an inspiration to a lot of activists who are looking to practice a form of activism that allows for more care in their work. That is, if you may allow me to say, that is more feminized. A lot of caring labor, a lot of labor of emotions is done in the movements by women. And even if not done by women, it's done in a gendered way, right? So let's not make it about the binary of men versus women. It's a very gendered thing. So creating movements that allow you to step away from this gender division of labor, creating movements that appreciate and acknowledge and celebrate the feminized labor, creating movements that deal with the stress and burnout that comes at the time, and they are able to use tools effectively to be able to address the needs of those who are most marginalized within those spaces, and creating movements that bring about change without traumatizing anyone or any system further. That is at the heart of collective liberation, of co-liberation. You are not free if I'm not free. All of us need to be free together. And that goes for every single being on this planet. That is based in the idea of connection. And I will, sorry, this is just I promise my last line, that what really, just sharing my own experience, that working in a lot of environments that were prone to burnout and toxicity, what I found when I made those changes was that while there is something like a trauma vortex in a system that really sucks everything in, and once you're in there, you're just spinning around, unable to get out. There is also the good wall of healing energy that can be introduced into the system. It literally starts from here, from your own heart, and as it expands, it touches other people. The light of it touches other people. And what that can do is, you have to really, I've always found this to be a very collective process. Healing is collective. It is not individual. You cannot heal yourself in isolation. You have to connect. You have to feel safe and engaged. You have to bring about systemic change by introducing systemic healing. So all you can do really is put that little ball of healing energy, start from yourself, start from your plants, start from the animals that you care for, start from the people that you care for, and then let it just unfold and go out. There you go. Thank you so much for listening to me and for today's workshop. Please, I will be going through your, I've been going through your chat questions. The discussion was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much to the team of Animal Alliance Asia, Aim, Kaho, Elia, Wendy, everybody here. Sarah, thank you so much for today's space. And please feel free to use the resources, share it among your circles, and reach out if you need, if you want to talk about anything.
Thank you so much, Mhelaab. It was an amazing and inspirational presentation. And it's like you provided us with both knowledge and also tools to identify our own needs and the causes and symptoms of burnout. And I think it's really important once in a while to have other people reminding us that our needs matter. And self-care is, like you say, it's political and it's not selfish, it's self-care. And it's like you said, it's really touching that healing is it's an act of collective thing, and we build on love and healing and take care of our own mental health. So thank you so much to start this important conversation. And would you like to leave your details, contact details, or social media, so those who would like to continue this important conversation can do so after this workshop? I'm so sorry that we have so little time. It's such an
No, absolutely fine. And again, you know, there's always I have put the energies out there, so, and I put the resources out there, and I'm very confident that everyone will be using these resources to do the